I'm the events director for Mountaineers for Progress. We'd like to thank you to our third and final Congressional or candidate forum. Tonight we are hosting our candidates for the first Congressional District in West Virginia. And let's get started. We have Tom Payne and Kendra Frichet. Some of you might have seen on our invitation that Ralph Baxter was going to be here, and we received word from him that he's made a choice to spend his evening at another location tonight. So I apologize for that. And we are going to continue as planned. So thank you all for being here. You could be anywhere tonight and you chose to be here with us. So thank you. We are going to start with introductions. We're going to let the candidates have 2 to 3 minutes to introduce themselves to you. And then we will go to a number of prepared questions that we have, and then we'll take audience questions. We are live streaming the event through the Mountaineers for Progress Facebook page. And it's also being filmed by West TV, and we will post the link once that goes live afterwards. When we go through questions, the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer, and we have a timekeeper in the front, and she has a green card that shows the candidates they have 30 seconds left, yellow when there's 15 seconds left, and red when their time is up. However, if they're in the middle of a response, to be able to finish their thought, we're not going to just cut them off. So
I was going to ask if she has a push button that if we go past, we get the turn.
She has a... I was actually at a forum where they used a timer, and when the timer was done, it quacked like a duck. Quack, 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 quack. And no matter how hard they tried, you can't keep talking when that thing is going quack, quack, quack. So I thought that was a great idea, but we just had Julia with the card. So before the forum started, we randomly selected who would go first, and we are going to start with Ms. Kendra Frichet.
I'm going to stand up. I hope everybody can hear me. It sounds like this is working. Kudos to our sound team, also known as my son. And if I go too long, he may just cut off my mic, so which he wishes he could do at home. My name is Kendra Frichet, and I am running for Congress in the West Virginia 1st District because I think we need real change in Washington. And I think I represent that change. I am a law professor here at WVU College of Law. I teach family law mostly. I write scholarship in the area of family law, particularly Title IX and same-sex marriage are 2 issues that I have written a lot about. And I decided to do this for a couple of reasons. A lot of you have heard my story of how I decided to run, but mostly because I think we need more people like us running for office. We need more people who are what I would call middle class, who can't independently fund a campaign. We need people who work for a living. We need people who have kids in public school. We need more women, in my mind. And all of those things, I think, where I was looking for someone who would be willing who had those characteristics, who would be willing to run, and people kept saying that you should do it. And I thought about it and I realized that they're right. So I decided to go ahead and put my hat in the ring. But what I've been talking about a lot, and you've heard me talk about before perhaps, is the importance of freedom in the United States, and this notion that I have of collective freedom versus personal or individual freedom. Both of those things are important to us. But what I want to talk to you about tonight is actually government. One of the things that I think we need to be doing in our political discourse is talk more about how government is good. And the reason why government is good is because the government is us. If we want to make change, we can. Because the founders set up a system of government that is based on the premise of self-governance. They gave us a gift. They said, we're going to give you a very simple structure, a very simple foundation, upon which you can build whatever scaffolding you want. And if you don't like it, you can change it, you can renovate it. So if we don't like what's happening in government, I don't like the idea of this notion of other, that government is outside of our control, and that we don't have a say in what happens there. If we don't like it, we can change it, which means that it's inherently good. Government isn't perfect, but it's not some behemoth that we can't, that's out of our control. So what I want to do is talk about how government is good and how we can use it to our advantage and to protect our collective freedom. And my time's up, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Test. It's on, okay? And good evening to everyone, and I appreciate your being here this evening. I talked to some in the audience, and it sounds like a very good audience. And as they probably mentioned, my name is Tom Payne, and I am the common sense candidate returning common sense to Congress. And of course, we all know that Congress has no common sense, so it certainly needs some. My family traces its West Virginia heritage to Pendleton County, Virginia, before the Revolutionary War. And I have a long history of service in the United States Army, starting with being drafted at age 19, and culminating that by graduating from West Point, and I'll leave the year off, and serving in the United States Army as a regular and a reserve officer for about 28 years. One of my most memorable times was when I was the commanding officer of the lead American infantry combat company to go into Tel Aviv in 1973. Fortunately, the president canceled, so I did not get to do that, but the country worked out better for the country. I also have a business experience and career, especially in intellectual property law, where I was part of teams that went around the world executing billion-dollar transactions for the General Electric Company, where I was 2 reports away from Jack Welch, the CEO. Growing up in West Virginia, I internalized our tremendous West Virginia values and combined them with those that I internalized at West Point. And each of those have served me well. But I'd like to get across 2 important ones that I feel very strongly about. One is from the West Point motto: duty, honor, country. And the second is from the cadet prayer: Lord, give me the strength to do the harder right rather than the easier wrong, and not to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. Now, West Virginia has some critical issues, and I'm not going to go into, well, later on I hope to go into all these, but some that I've identified are lack of broadband, internet. West Virginia ranks 50th in well-being index, that is for about the last 9 years, and we also need revenue from marijuana legalization. My advantage as your candidate is that I have already established personal relationships with current United States senators and representatives in Congress, including my West Point classmate, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, Senator Blumenthal and Murphy of Connecticut, to name only a few. I will cooperate with those members of Congress in order to pass legislation critical to West Virginia and to cooperate with them on issues critical for our state. In short, I already have an advantage over other new members thanks to these existing personal relationships. Sorry for going a little long. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to also remind everyone, feel free. We do have postcards that are in the back, and we have people who can pass it. So if you'd like to write down a question that you have, we have postcards and pens in the back. Okay? So our first set of questions is about healthcare. And we will just alternate who gets to go first. You'll have 2 questions, and if you feel like you need more time or to have a rebuttal, we'll allow that. Opioids. The opioid crisis is crippling West Virginia. A recent study from the American Enterprise Institute ranked West Virginia the first in the country for total per capita costs, estimating that opioid crisis cost our state $8 billion per year. In 2016, the Center for Disease Control found that West Virginia has the highest rate per capita drug overdose deaths in the country, which is 33% increase over the next highest state of Ohio. What role does Congress play in addressing the opioid epidemic? If elected, what steps would you take to address it? Mr. Payne, you have the microphone, so you can start.
Thank you.
Well, when I was in Germany as an Army officer, we had a heroin epidemic over there. And one of the things that we learned was that if you allow people, in this case they were soldiers between the ages of 17 and 25, to have nothing to do, it did not result in any good outcome, I assure you. And we did give them something to do. We helped build their self-esteem back to where it should have been, and that is one of the keys to getting off of opioids, is self-esteem, and giving people work. Right now, I believe West Virginia has one of the highest, obviously, it was just mentioned, negative outcomes from opioids in the state. First of all, what I would do is stop needless production and make it, to use a Japanese production term, just in time. You cannot flood the state with opioids like Congressman Reno of Pennsylvania and his buddies who passed that law. It was signed by the president and nobody looked at it. 2 million opioids to a county that had a county seat of 5,000 people. That was definitely a terrible thing to do, and we've got to stop it. The only way we're going to get high-paying jobs in West Virginia is to cut down on opioid negative outcomes. We've got to cut the shipping of the opioids to us. We've got to limit it. The prescriptions that are written on it, we've got to control it very tightly. Thank you.
So the federal government has a role in multiple ways. First of all, at the opioid forum that David McKinley hosted here in Morgantown in early December, that David McKinley did not attend, we heard from his panel that at least 90% of people who are in treatment for opioid addiction are on Medicaid. If that Medicaid funding is cut, as David McKinley has voted to do, 90+% of our addicts will be booted out of treatment, and we will be in a even worse situation than we're in. So the federal government has a role in terms of funding Medicaid so that detox and rehab are available. But we don't have enough of either of those things. We don't have enough beds, and we don't have enough time in the programs for people to get healthy before they go out of this program and then become addicted again. The other thing the federal government can do is get out of the way of medical marijuana. The federal government's current policy and laws with respect to marijuana means that people don't have safe pain alternatives to the heavy-duty opioids and other pain, addictive pain treatments. The other thing that the federal government can do, I agree with Tom, is help build community. That if we have investment at the community level, we can rebuild the purpose people have, that we can help them be fulfilled and engaged in their communities so that they have something to go home to. So that's 3 ways the federal government can be involved and should be involved in helping people overcome opioid addiction.
Great, thank you. And it's interesting that you bring up Medicaid because our next question is related to that. West Virginia was one of many states that used provisions in the Affordable Care Act to expand Medicaid coverage. As of March 2018, approximately 165,000 West Virginians, in other words, 10% of the state's population, is covered as a result of these new provisions. Do you support the expansion, and why or why not?
Should I go? Okay. I do support the expansion of Medicaid as a shorter-term solution until we get universal health care. Universal health care is the way to address many of our health care concerns, because we do not then have people who are going too long before getting treatment and needing more expensive emergency intervention or hospitalization because they have not had preventive care or early intervention. So the Medicaid expansion was absolutely crucial to West Virginia, but that's only because we don't have universal health care. If we had universal health care, we would have more mobility for people who do have jobs, that they could start a new business or they could change jobs without worry that they're going to lose their health care. We would have people who actually, I mean, we would be spending less on healthcare, actually. The system is much more efficient if we have universal healthcare. And we would have people in treatment and probably dealing with whatever ailments they have in a more proactive way. So universal healthcare, I think, is our goal. At least it should be, in my mind. But in the meantime, Medicaid is crucial, and if we lose that funding, I think we're going to be in a very bad situation in West Virginia.
Thank you, and I agree with almost everything she said, and would only change it slightly. I do agree that Medicare is critical. Medicaid, I'm showing my age here, and it is also very good. The other thing is that realistically, universal health care is going to be a real climb. And it just has too much, in my view, right now, too much objections from the Republicans to have a chance. So I think that should be bold, but we are fire for Medicaid for all.
Bullshit. Just a second.
I'd like to remind everyone in the audience, please no calling out. We're here to listen. Thank you.
The other thing is the medical marijuana is proving to be a real alternative to opioids. And I am sure that the state should do something about that and control that. And the sooner we can get not only medical, recreational marijuana, we will solve a lot of problems, including our deficit budget. And the marijuana proceeds are estimated at about $300 million a year. We can do this, but we need to do it quickly, particularly with the marijuana and the medical portion of it. I believe it's already passed, but we need to do those very quickly and to obtain the revenues for the state. $300 million is a lot of money, and there are a lot of places that we can spend it.
Okay, thank you. So we are posting the questions up here, and based on kind of our candidates' responses, we may alter them a little bit. So I'd like to follow up on talking about universal health care and, yes, sir?
I don't believe she had a chance.
I went first.
That's okay, thank you. We've heard legislators talk about increasing access to health care, and others go to say we should join the rest of the industrialized world in adopting single-payer or Medicare for all system. Could you elaborate on what you think the difference is between increasing access and actually getting people full access to health care? So, Mr. Payne, you get to start first.
Well, access is very simple. If you have access to health care, you have access to health care. But is it usable? Can you use it? Does it pay for what needs to be paid? Is it reasonably priced? You know, you can have access, but you cannot necessarily receive attention from doctors because you may be priced out of the system. At that point, how shall we say it? What do they call them? Write-downs or the deductibles may be so high that you will not be able to afford it. And the only reasonable way to do it, to get universal health care or universal Medicaid or universal Medicare, is to make it available to all citizens. If we can do that, then we will be a big step toward universal health care. Totally.
Yeah, the problem with access is that I have access to my neighbor's mansion, but I can't buy it unless I have money to get it. So access is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the ability of anybody, regardless of where they work or what their age is or how much money they have, to be able to get health care when they need it. We shouldn't live in a country where someone can die of appendicitis. We shouldn't live in a country where an upper respiratory infection can knock you out or make you or bankrupt you. So people keep saying to me when I talk about universal health care, well, how are we going to pay for it? Well, let me tell you, I can count up 8 different ways that I pay for health care every month. I pay through my paycheck at work, I supplement my employer who also pays, so there's two sources of health care payment just for my family. I pay deductibles, I pay for prescriptions, I pay for Medicaid and Medicare through my taxes, I pay for, my employer also pays to supplement all of those things. You can go through multiple factors of how we are paying in many ways for health care, and when you add all of it up, we're paying about double what you would pay in a country that has universal health care, and our health outcomes are half as good. We may have excellent health care for people who can afford it, but when we have people dying of ailments that should be very easily addressed with a single doctor's visit, we do not have good health care outcomes in our country. So it's not a matter of not being able to afford it, it's a matter of political will. And we really, now, I believe, are getting to a place where we have the political will to make this change. And we can have the honest conversation, and that's what I'd like to do.
Thank you. There was a question about which candidates will be on the ballot for this congressional district. So I'd just like to take this time to remind everybody, we have our 2 candidates here. We have Tom Pink and Kendra Furché and Ralph Baxter, and those are our 3 Democratic candidates. And then David McKinley for the Republican is an incumbent, and he does not have a primary. So I hope whoever asked that question, that answered that question. Okay, so can you make this go up? We're going to use our technology. Ooh, look at that. So we had a prepared question about guns, and I think the audience submitted question was worth reading. So, for our candidates, and I believe Kendra's first. Our country has a unique gun violence problem in comparison to other developed countries. Most gun murders involve handguns, and American women are 16 times more likely to be a murdered by gun victim than their counterparts in other high-income countries. And since the lifting of restrictions on assault-style weapons in 2004, our mass attacks have become more deadly. Meanwhile, I think it's 80%, 78 to 80% of Americans support universal background checks as a possible solution. To each of you, do you support universal background checks? And where do you stand on common sense gun legislation in general?
Yes, I absolutely do support universal background checks. That's easy. I mean, I think it's incomprehensible that anyone would be opposed to universal background checks and closing loopholes at gun shows and private transfer of guns. All of those things shouldn't make it easier for people to get guns who shouldn't have them. I also am very concerned about gun violence when it comes to domestic violence, because if you look at, there's a correlation between a domestic violence event typically and someone who's engaged in a mass murder. So if you look at a lot of those mass tragedies, look back, there's often a family member who has been murdered by a gun before that person goes out and kills more people. I don't mean to say, obviously, it's not causation, it's correlation, but these are data points that we need to be able to take into account when we make gun legislation. And when it comes to data points, we need to know what we're talking about. We need to be able to study gun violence. We need to be able to have every conversation. We need to make sure that the NRA is not shutting us down when we decide that we don't like our kids being hunted at school anymore. Every conversation has to be on the table. We need to be listening to our kids, who are the people who are at the core of this mass tragedy that's happening in the country, and we need to be able to make responsible legislation so that we can keep our families safe in public and in school. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I don't mean to say that I have all the answers, but we need to be able to have those discussions without the NRA controlling our elections and making it so that we can't talk about being smart when it comes to guns.
Almost everything that she has said I agree with, but first I'd like to get a count here. How many people here have guns? How many people here have actually fired guns? How many people here have seen people that died as a result of a firearm discharge?
You mean live or on?
No, I mean dead.
I mean,
After-
no, I mean,
Saul or
do you
just
have
no?
to see it in person, or can you watch it, a film or
No,
something?
I'm thinking in person. In person is much more dramatic. Okay. Anybody know what this is? It's a particular type of bullet.
223?
223, exactly right. That bullet is designed to kill. If Mr. Scalise had not been hit with a 7.62, instead he'd been hit with the 223, he would not be in the House of Representatives today. This is the biggest problem we have right here. Aside from the background checks and the increased availability and the enforcement by the law enforcement people when they go to check on people like the guy in Florida who was the mass murderer there. That's what we have to do, among other things. But in my view, getting rid of assault rifles is number one, because it has the highest capability of killing people in the shortest amount of time. And I hate to admit this, I've never done it, but if I were to have that opportunity, if I'd be stupid enough or crazy enough, I'm trained well enough, that it would be over in almost no time. And somebody that's good with an AR-15 can take out more lives than anyone else can.
You're first on the next question. Yep. Thank you. You up for the next slide? It's like magic. That's great. Thank you. So moving on to a different category for reproductive rights. Women's health and other reproductive rights are often discussed at the federal level. Federal funding of Planned Parenthood is frequently debated. This past January, Congress was presented with and voted down a 20-week abortion ban. Many advocates of reproductive rights have concerns about the longevity of Roe v. Wade if President Trump appoints another Supreme Court justice. This past October, the Trump administration rolled back an Affordable Care Act rule that required employer-provided insurance to cover the cost of birth control. Please describe your position on reproductive justice and a woman's right to choose.
Well, the easy one first is the woman's right to choose. I have absolute confidence in that is a right that all women should have, without interference from males.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? That is a right that I believe all women should have without doubt. And that's without interference from males, unless it's a doctor. The abortion, I'm afraid that I will go with Roe versus Wade, and I believe that it will not be overturned, even if President Trump gets his new Supreme Court justice, because in my view, Supreme Court justices do not like to overturn well-established precedent. Now, there have been some terrible cases in the past where that was done, and I don't think that Roe versus Wade is going to rise to that level. In my opinion, the law on this is well settled and should not be a problem. As far as Planned Parenthood goes, that should be funded fully, and I would certainly vote to do that and improve it in any way possible.
So I believe in a woman's right to choose, and I'm glad that the question was worded the way it was, because we need to think about reproductive health as a spectrum. We will reduce abortion rates if women have access to comprehensive contraception. If you want to reduce abortion rates, you should vote for Democrats, because when we are in office, abortion rates go down. It's because we believe in comprehensive contraception, we believe in comprehensive sex education, we believe in taking care of people once they're born, and we believe in women's rights. If we don't believe in any of those things, we are in a much worse situation. We live in a society that does not value people, and we see the results of that. So I see this as an entire spectrum of respecting women, of respecting families, of respecting people's privacy. And while it's true that the Supreme Court does not like to overturn settled precedent, Roe v. Wade, a lot of people don't realize, is actually not the controlling precedent on abortion anymore. It's Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which actually was a case about consent and notification. And that changed the rule in the Supreme Court to evaluating whether we can restrict abortion on the basis of an undue burden on a woman's rights, which has allowed states to start chipping away at different parts of reproductive rights for women. And I think that we need to be very careful about how our states, I mean, this isn't a federal issue, but we need to be really cognizant of what's going on in West Virginia now with SJR 12, and we need to make sure we vote in November. That is a very, very crucial vote that we will have in front of us. So, I'm pro-choice and I stand by women. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Should be taxes. Good. Moving on to taxes, everybody's favorite subject of things to talk about. Despite what some may say, paying taxes is a necessary function of a country and its government. Most opposition to taxes stems from the belief that Congress does not spend our tax dollars efficiently. In the last days of 2017, Congress and the Trump administration passed a sweeping $1.5 trillion tax reform plan. This legislation is highly unpopular nationwide because the vast majority of refunds are given to corporations and not people. Additionally, the federal budget deficit is expected to reach $1 trillion per year by 2020, despite promises from our officials to shrink the deficit instead of growing it. Please describe your position on taxes, the federal budget, and what this means for the average taxpayer. And you're first here.
So, I think this is exactly right. It's not, people actually, studies have shown people don't mind paying taxes. They mind that their taxes don't do anything. So, I mean, we are focusing on the wrong thing if we just cut taxes, because we have exactly what's happened. When taxes are cut, and here's the thing, the concept of a middle-class tax cut isn't inherently awful to me. I think the middle class carries a huge part of the burden, and I think we should be addressing that. But why can't we have, if we say we want a middle class tax cut, why can't we have a middle class tax cut? That's not what we got with the tax cuts that President Trump pushed through. We got a huge tax cut at the very top of the tax bracket that never trickles down to the rest of us. It's totally inefficient, and it has will balloon our national debt to the point where our grandchildren will be suffering for that for a very long time. We need to invest in our infrastructure, we need to invest in our schools, we need to invest in universal health care, we need to invest in our communities. That takes taxes, obviously, but people, like I said, don't mind paying them if they see what they're getting for them, and that's the problem. We pay our taxes and we don't see the benefit, as I can say from my shaky car that I'm driving thousands of miles around this district and has been torn up on the roads in West Virginia. We're not getting what we've paid, and we need to start holding government accountable and making sure that that money comes back to us, because those are our investment dollars in our community.
I cannot argue at all with her dissertation on taxes. It was well spoken as a true law professor, and I say that with some knowledge because I actually had some tax courses, and I did not like them for anything, especially corporate tax. But speaking of corporate tax, that's where the problem is. The taxes, returns, or refunds, or however you want to say it, lowering of taxes should be geared toward the average American and not the average billionaire or large corporation, which is where they are going today as we speak. And we need to elect people who will do something about that. Right now, with the makeup of the Senate and the House, particularly the House, nothing is going to happen in that area. And you may remember when the Republicans were not in charge, they were all the time talking about a balanced budget. Now, when they got in charge, how many people here have heard them talk about a balanced budget? Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is something that I plan to do if I'm elected, to help them lower those taxes for those who work and raise them for those who don't, meaning the corporations. Well, the federal budget, I think I'll allocate a little more time to that, but I think I've clarified my position on that. Does everyone understand my position on taxes? And the federal budget? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and as a follow-up, we have a audience question about taxes. It says, how do you feel about our tax money that's being spent on war? $5.6 trillion on war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. Wouldn't this money be better directed for our healthcare, schools, homelessness?
Thank you very much. At least something now that I have some real experience in, and that is war. And we have made some terrible mistakes in deciding to go to war. It has cost this country extremely dear, not only in money, but also in human lives. It was totally unnecessary. But we are saddled with it, so we need to continue. First of all, we need to take care of our veterans, which would not have wound up as they are today, except for the needless war. And the second thing is, we need to make sure that we start budgeting the right amount to return this country to what it was before the World War I, before the 9/11 and the attack on the country. And we overreacted, and we spent too much money, we committed too many things. I don't know if you remember the thing, if you saw Dick Cheney on television saying, when he was asked, how are we going to handle the invasion of Iraq? And he says, well, it won't be a problem. He said, they will greet us as liberators, which is true in a war situation for so long. And then he said, in answer to how much it's going to cost the country, he says, well, it's not going to cost us anything. We will use the money from the Iraqi oil to pay for it. Now I ask you, how many dollars of receipts from the sale of Iraqi oil have you heard of or have any knowledge of? I don't know. Matter of fact, I think the number is 0. So we need to budget and tax the group more, the higher, highly increase the tax for wealthy as opposed to working class people.
So I think I believe we've been very hawkish in our policy, in our international policy. I think I agree that we have spent way too much money on conflicts in the wrong places. We did not, we are in a different time where diplomacy in some circumstances is not possible because we're not dealing with hostile countries necessarily, we're dealing with factions. But to the extent that we know exactly where our threat is coming from and we can address it in a non-hostile way, we should do that instead of rushing headlong into conflict. And I'm very concerned about foreign policy now with our sort of administration that seems very interested in throwing down threats and kind of behaving in strongman tactics to bully instead of engaging in diplomacy. I also think, though, that we cannot be how we were when we hesitated to get into World War II, when there are major humanitarian crises going on around the world, there is a role for the United States to play. I don't know if it's a military role in every instance, but there may be a time when we need to get involved in hostile conflict. I just think we have been much too reliant on our military and our sort of big presence in the world for our military instead of relying on diplomacy.
That leads directly to our next question, which is about foreign policy. It goes without saying that we are living in very turbulent times. North Korea, China, Russia, and Syria have dominated recent headlines due to military aggression and/or conflicts in their diplomatic relation with the United States. The Trump administration has already fired one Secretary of State and has left many ambassador positions unfilled at a time when strong and steady diplomacy is critically important. What do you think will be the most critical foreign policy issues in the coming year? And what will you do as a member of Congress to address them?
Well, conflict in the Middle East. I mean, it has been, my entire lifetime, we have, I think, been reacting or sort of engaging in conflict in the Middle East from the United States. And I actually think that we have our role in all of that conflict should start, as I said, with diplomacy. We have had some success when we've had presidents, when we've had administrations who have really attempted to engage in building the bridge between the conflicting entities in the Middle East, and that has tended to, pre-9/11, has tended to lower the temperature of conflict around the world. So I think we need to start with diplomacy. I also think we need to be willing to engage in conflict if we see a humanitarian issue like the Holocaust happening. I am uncomfortable with the notion that we would sit back and do nothing in a situation like that, but we have been far too quick to jump past diplomacy and into hostile conflict in my mind. And I also think Congress's role in this is crucial, and we have gotten to the point where our administration is making decisions that are acts of war that are not being approved by Congress and circumventing our Constitution. So I think we, those of us who are running for Congress, have a much more active role in this than we should have a much more active role in this than we have had in the recent past.
And picking up on that, I wholly agree with you. One of the first things that I think needs to be done is the Secretary of State needs to be someone who has real diplomatic experience, and we need to refill all of those positions in the Department of State that have been eliminated under the Trump administration. And I say this, and this may not be an exact quote, but I understand that the Secretary of Defense, General Mathis, has said that for every dollar that we spend that we don't spend in diplomacy, we spend $1 million to undo the problems that we allowed to occur. My view of the most critical areas that countries that we face are China, Russia, and North Korea because of the nuclear war potential there, and the Middle East is last. And I'm speaking from a strategic value to the country itself. We only have so many resources. We can only spread them around the world as much as we can. And right now, from a military viewpoint, we are overstretched. We cannot, not only can we not fight two world wars simultaneously, I'm not sure that we can fight one war simultaneously well enough to get what needs to be done. So we're going to have to make some very serious inroads with China. And Russia is a real, as we know, because every day on TV, the president seems to think that Putin is such a good guy. As a study of Russian history told me a long time ago, you cannot trust the Russians. And Putin is certainly no exception.
Okay, we have an audience question, which you don't hear a lot of people talking about, and I love it. It says, agriculture is a critical industry of high value in West Virginia, but has not been talked about since the days of Senator Jennings Randolph. What will you do to ensure that agriculture and conservation receive the attention they need, both fiscally and policy? It's a great question.
Agriculture is very important, and one of the things I've noted walking, not occasionally, but driving around the state more often, is that some of the fields that were being cultivated when I was a younger person are not being cultivated now. And I've started asking some questions why that is. And some of the answers I got was that it doesn't pay the farmer to do this on such a small scale. But there is a group, I understand, that are working very much with hemp to make that a cash crop in West Virginia. And if they're successful in doing that, the agricultural aspect of West Virginia will take a great leap forward and be a very substantial crop, cash crop. What would I do? Well, I think that I would work with the commissioner of the state agricultural group and get some recommendations from them and try and find out how the federal government can help. And if we establish that, then I will go to other members of Congress that I know and attempt them to join us in obtaining legislation and funding for these programs that we need in West Virginia.
So, I don't know, I was looking around, we don't have a West Virginia flag in here, but if we did, I could show you that there, on the West Virginia flag, there is a coal miner on one side and a farmer on the other. Farming is part of our history in West Virginia, and we have fallen away from it because we've focused more on coal mining, which, which has dominated our economy for a long time. One of the ways that we can diversify our economy is to redevelop our agricultural roots, no pun intended, and actually get our communities jump-started, in my mind, with small federal grants that could go to farmers. It takes 3 years for something's going on the screen up there. I can see everybody looking. Oh, is it the flag? Did you find it? Yeah, there's the farmer on the right. So one of the things we could do is have federal investment at the local level, small grants to help people get farms started. It takes about 3 years for a crop to be profitable. And the federal government can do that for people who want to start farming. We have, industrial hemp is exactly right. The United States is the only industrialized country that does not allow people to grow industrial hemp, which is an incredibly useful plant and very profitable. And not only do we not allow people to grow it, but we are the #1 importer of it. We are also the #1 exporter in the United States, West Virginia, of marijuana. It's just not legal. We really need to take advantage of our agricultural roots in West Virginia. We need to reclaim strip-mined areas with agricultural operations that are bringing money into the communities from the base to the top. We need to take advantage of all of that profit that we can make from those very lucrative crops.
Great, thank you. We have an audience question. It says, I guess we can put it up there. The question is written, many wealthy conservatives have used tax-exempt organizations to fund political causes, which is supposed to be illegal. How do we stop this? So it doesn't have to be directed necessarily at one political party or ideology, but how can we prevent tax-exempt organizations from getting involved in political engagements?
Well, there's a range of that. I mean, when I was a political organizer, when I just graduated from college, I worked for 5 years, working mostly organizing to educate people about the dangers of school vouchers. How things have not changed. And we were a nonprofit, we were a tax exempt organization. At one level, we were a 501c3, and then we had a more branch that was slightly more political. We could get a little bit more involved on political issues with a 501c4, and then a PAC. And that could endorse candidates and give money directly to campaigns. We have gone into now a new iteration of that with super PACs, where we have massive amounts of money going into campaigns with, either directly through contributions that are legally transferred or independent expenditures to support candidates. And really, that's a proxy issue. What's really concerning about that is that it takes away our voice, right? If I'm taking money from an entity that's giving me so much that that's the only way I can get to Congress, then that's who I'm going to listen to. So we have a problem at the Supreme Court level with Citizens United, and we can respond to that legislatively, and we need to. I believe we should move toward public elections where we are funded through public funding instead of individual contributions and PACs, and because we need a level playing field. We need to make sure that the people who are going to represent us are the people we want and not the people who are paid for.
How many people have heard a recent news story or read a recent news story about a member of the Trump administration who told a story about how if a lobbyist was sitting in his office and he gave money, that was one outcome. If a lobbyist was sitting in his office and didn't give money, that was another outcome. And if a member from the home state was there, he took care of it. Anybody remembering that? What do you think about that? Do you think that's a good way to conduct democracy? Well, that's right, it isn't. And what I would try to do is try to eliminate that sort of thing. I would look at it as if I were the representative. I don't care where you're from or who you are or who you represent. If you're in my office and you are there for a good purpose, I'll be happy to listen to you. If you want to talk to me about money and so forth and doing certain things and giving me contributions, I'm not sure I'll be willing to do that without some sort of acknowledgement that this is the true cause that it's for, and I will support that, not necessarily because of the money. I won't take the money, but because of the value of the request. Money is the root of all evils, and that's been said long before I was born. The other thing is that right now this country is being run on money, and it's being bought by the upper 1/10 of 1% of our population, and the other great number is suffering from. Thank you.
Okay, we have an audience question about protests, and the direct question is, how do you feel about football players taking a knee? And I would also be interested to know your thoughts on different states and their wanting to change laws, reining in different types of protests. So as a member of Congress, how would you approach people's right to protest, and what's your general opinion on that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to give my general opinion on some things that I have personal knowledge of. And that is, when I was in the United States Army as an officer, it was my duty to protect people who protested. As you all may recall, or some of you may not, in those days they were burning the American flag. I did not like the fact that people burned American flags. But that was my personal opinion. That was not my duty. My duty was to protect those people with my life, if necessary, so that they would have the right to peacefully protest, irrespective of what it was. And taking a knee at a football game is not nearly, in my view, rise to the level of burning the American flag. Now, maybe it does to other people. We're all citizens, and we all have our own personal views on this. But in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the law, in the terms of what's right, we should, and I have, defended people who protested against things that I thought were perfectly okay, but in their view, they weren't. I can't think of anything else right now that's relevant to this, so that is my personal view on it, and it'd be awful hard for someone to convince me otherwise unless it comes down to as a law.
So I think the time when our civil rights are threatened is the time that it's most important to stand by them. When the USA Patriot Act was passed after 9/11, there were all these arguments that we needed it because there had been this attack on the United States and we needed to be okay with our invasion of privacy to protect ourselves. But that's precisely when we need to stand by the protections that were put into the Constitution to ensure that we continue this American experiment. If we say, well, in this instance, let's overlook that right because we think that this particular thing is more offensive to us or more worrisome to us, then we lose that right. If we tell people how they can politically protest, then we've lost the concept and the important American ideal behind the First Amendment. So I believe in the First Amendment, I believe in freedom, I believe in patriotism, I believe in the United States, I believe in the Constitution, and therefore we should be able to protest when we think that we're being mistreated or where our rights are being obstructed. My belief in the First Amendment goes back to the notion that I may not like what you have to say, but I will always defend your right to say it.
Great. Audience question. How do you see yourself approaching the Scott Pruitt handling of the EPA, and what is the general role of the EPA in our country today?
Well, Scott Pruitt's idea of the EPA is that it doesn't actually, I think he's trying to take the P right out. The Environmental Protection Agency, I think he needs to understand that that is not just a giveaway to the organizations and companies that want to damage our environment. His idea of the EPA is incredibly wrong. And I think in West Virginia we have to be even more vigilant because we live in a place where we have extreme beauty and we have things underground that people want to take out of the ground and in the process are going to necessarily interfere with that natural beauty that we have here. So we need to balance our interests. If we are going to be a state that continues to focus on the extraction industries, which I believe we will do for some period of time, as long as there are natural resources to be extracted, I suspect there will be people who will want to remove them. If we are going to do that, we need to charge them the appropriate amount of money in taxes so that they clean up or stop damaging the environment to the extent that they have, because it can't be a zero-sum game where we just tear everything up and we lose all of what is West Virginia in the process. So the EPA is here to protect us, to protect West Virginians, to keep our air clean and our water clean. And I fear that we're getting away from that. We need to ensure that the administration is protecting us so that we can stay here and stay healthy in the process of being, committed members of this community.
I happen to have watched a little of Mr. Pruitt's, Secretary Pruitt's testimony today before Congress, and it was a real joy. You should all have an opportunity to see him dance, and he's not even good at that. But the equal, there's no protection. The current administration is about eliminating almost everything that they can think of that has been done under the past administration. And they even go back to administrations before that. They're also taking a page out of the Reagan book, which was while he authorized the EPA, well, what he forgot to do was fund it. And that is what you're having occur in the EPA right now. A lot of people who were there are being let go, forced to leave. All of a lot of the projects they had dealing with how to handle or how to maintain the environment as it is are being attacked and discarded. And the secretary used to go to Paris for 2 or 3 nights on his way to Morocco to do something with liquid natural gas that had nothing to do with what he did. So I am not really pleased with Mr. Crippling. And I think that there's a good chance that he may be one of the next. He could be the next to be let go by the president. And I certainly hope so, or it's long overdue.
Okay, thank you. Many national polls have shown that hate crimes and Islamophobia have gone up tremendously since President Trump took office. What would you do to stop this?
What would I do to stop that? Well, I mean, if I were a police officer like I used to be, I would take immediate intervention, but I'm not. I think that we need to ensure that there are laws on the books that do take care of that, to cover that and have penalties for that sort of thing. Then we have to make sure that the police and the responsible organizations, the FBI, everyone involved in law enforcement has to enforce it and make the arrest if appropriate. Then we have to go to the judicial system and have them execute whatever the penalties are for those violations after they're proven in a court of law. There's really not much for the Congress to do except to allocate the money for all of these organizations to do their job. I think that we can also write very clear legislation that makes it unlikely that anyone would be able to do those sort of things and get away with it. That's what I would try to do.
I agree that there is a law enforcement and a legal path to protecting people, but I think it's more at the core, I think it's more at the core of who we are, that we need leadership in the United States right now in having the uncomfortable conversations about what we think and how we act when it comes to our diversity with respect to many different parts. Religious diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, LGBTQ rights. We need to be very clear about who we are and where we have gone in our national discourse. Why we have these problems, I think, is in part because we have leadership that is demonstrating that it's okay to mistreat people on the basis of their differences. And interestingly, differences always assumes that we have a core that's the same, right? That everybody is different from us in the core. So if you're not in that mainstream, if you're not, that core population, then everyone else is different. That's not who we are as Americans. There's no one who owns America. We don't have a stake in it. No one has a stake in it more than anyone else. So this is extremely distressing to me that we would be in a place where we have these hate crimes happening. And I think it's going to take leadership and hard work and difficult conversations to start thinking about who we are as Americans.
What is your position on the Mueller investigation?
Well, actually, it's interesting. I've been hearing that one of the things that Republicans will be doing after the general election in states where we have people who voted for President Trump in particular in high numbers, is that they will be attacking Democrats on the basis of the notion that the only reason that a Democrat would go to Congress would be to impeach. And I want to say right now, I have no interest in impeaching someone who didn't do anything impeachable. I will not impeach someone on the basis of political party, because that's un-American. But I will vote to impeach someone who's broken the law. And we need to know what exactly has happened in our country to protect ourselves in the future. We need to know what the facts are, and we need to apply the law appropriately so that we can be sure that we will be protected from future intervention. And we need to be more proactive in that regard as well. The Mueller investigation, I hope, will teach us what exactly has been happening with other countries, particularly obviously Russia, meddling in our elections. We should be horrified at the concept that a foreign entity could change the outcome of our election. And it's not just it's not just Democrats being horrified that Republicans would be elected on the basis of meddling. It can go the other way. And if we don't understand that this is a two-way street that can hurt every American, then we will have failed in this American experiment. So I'll say it again, I will not vote for impeachment on the basis of political party. I would hope that Republicans would say the same. But I will take into account the facts and the law and make appropriate decisions on the basis of what we learn in this investigation.
And that is well stated. I personally would not support anything that would remove the Mueller group from any kind of, remove them from any kind of investigation without allowing them to complete the investigation and making the results known, at least to Congress, and certainly the Justice Department, and see what happens then. But I believe that there have been substantial misdoings in intervening by the Russian government, and that these things are eventually going to be traced back to them. It's taking a while, but there's an awful lot of ways that these things, the United States has the ability to monitor. And I believe I would not like to be in front of Mueller answering questions. As what was it, General Flynn found out, you can easily lie to the FBI. And it's not a good situation. I think this is going to work out well for us. And the good thing is that Trump, or President Trump, is doing more to hurt his cause than he is to help it. And I think in the long run that's going to work out very well. I'm not worried about the country. There are some checks and balances that are not obvious to everyone that are occurring, and Mueller will not be relieved or done away with.
Okay, we have a question from someone watching on the live stream. If elected, are there any committees that you're interested in?
I have been told that the Rules Committee can be very influential, and that while it is a lot of work, that a person on the Rules Committee can have considerably good influence. Another one I would like to be on is Defense. Obviously, I have a West Point classmate who is the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I'm pretty sure that he could help me out there, and we would work pretty well as a team as we have all our time since we were West Pointers together. Another one is intellectual property. That is my legal specialty, and the United States has been taking big hits in that. Senator Reid, Senator Manchin, Senator Murphy, and Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, all three recommended me to President Obama for confirmation as the Undersecretary of Commerce for Intellectual Property and the Director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which is the second longest title in the U.S. government. The only longer title is that as the director, I get a deputy. So now we have 2 more words. But at the time I was nominated for that, I was, the United States Patent and Trademark Office had been ranked first in the world for hundreds of years. And today, it is now ranked 11th. So we've got to do something about that. Technology with China, technology with the rest of the world. We are losing technology by having it stolen, especially by China. And I do have to agree with the President on that. We've got to stop China from stealing our technology.
I think that there are 2 words that we need to be very, very cognizant of in our federal government because they could actually have a deep impact on West Virginia and the rest of the country. And those 2 words are Betsy DeVos. I think that so education. I think the most important thing that we need to be thinking about in terms of maintaining people in West Virginia, keeping people here, making it possible for them to stay home when they graduate from school or they find themselves in a tough spot, is protecting our schools, protecting our teachers. And the plan that is coming out of the federal government right now to move to a school voucher system would be a disaster, not just for the country in general, but particularly for West Virginia. In West Virginia, the Board of Education is our #1 employer in multiple counties. The schools are hubs in our communities for not just education for our kids, but so we can keep an eye out for struggles that kids are having, so that we can make sure that kids have coats, so that we can make sure that kids have food. Our schools are our main conduit for our main connection to our kids, and therefore to our families, and therefore to our communities. They are the center of who we are. They absolutely need protection, they need support, and they need resources, and we will not get those if we attack them with school vouchers.
Okay, we have 2 questions left, and they're both somewhat related to money. Would a ban on attack ads be unconstitutional? Would you support a Truth in Political Advertising Act that would require acknowledgement of financial backers?
I think a ban on attack ads would be unconstitutional. I think if they're truthful, I mean, this is the big if, right? We actually live in a country where when the going gets tough, we can't simply chuck our rights and decide we're not going to have free speech because we don't like what people are saying. So I do think attack ads are an unfortunate reality, but I also think that we should have truth in our political system. We should absolutely have full transparency. We should know exactly where money is coming from at all times. I think what happened with Lissa Lucas on the floor of the House of Delegates, or the floor of the Capitol, was an outrageous display of an attempt to pull the cloak over what's really happening, which is all she was doing was reading out who had what contributions from what entities that were influencing the conversation that was happening, and they pulled her off the floor so she couldn't say what she was saying. That's absolutely outrageous. We need more sunshine. That's how we fight. We don't start screening what people could say. We make sure that what they're saying is truthful by holding them accountable to that truth and shining the sun and shining the light on every aspect of this political process.
Once again, I cannot disagree. Only add a few things here. One, I think that truthfulness is something we're currently missing in our president. I'm not sure how that can be reconciled completely, but I think it is not unusual for people to tell fibs about other people. And I have no problem with that as long as I have the opportunity to set the record straight. You know, I'm not worried about that for myself. Whether there should be legal penalties for telling lies in political ads, I'm not sure that I think the United States, that has always been part of the everyday political banter in the American society. So therefore, I'm definitely not for that. But I think we can mitigate it by requiring certain things be done. And I'm not sure what they are, but that would be an interesting committee to, I'm not sure there'd be a whole lot of people want to join in that one in the United States Congress. It's a shame that you can do this anonymously. I think that's one thing that we ought to be able to get out of it, and that means that if you're going to say things nasty in ads, there ought to be truth and origin of that. And that may be tough. And as I recall, you're the law professor, so Citizens United doesn't say anything about that, I don't believe. Okay. So I'm up.
Okay, final question, save the best one for last. If you win the primary, how will you be able to compete with McKinley's war chest?
If I win the primary, I am not worried about being able to compete with McKinley's war chest. As I mentioned before, I have a lot of friends that are already there, and I've already been talking to them, and they say that if I win, money will not be a problem. The problem will be that my fight, well, no, that wouldn't be true. Money will not be a problem, and I will have tremendous outside help. And when I say outside help, I'm talking about friends. If I win the election and I'm sworn in as a congressperson, they will then be colleagues. And I've established a reputation. I have friendships with people in Congress for a long time, and they will help me. I've already talked to them, but they can't do it in the primary.
So winning elections obviously takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of hard work to raise that money. And so I will be putting in a lot of time asking people for contributions because I won't accept corporate PAC money, and we have to counterbalance that. But money doesn't vote. And in wave elections, which is what we are hoping we're looking at, you can have as little as 1/5 of the money that your incumbent opponent has and still win. And that's because money only matters to the extent that you get name recognition out of it. That's what you raise money for. And so if name recognition is less of a concern because people are paying attention to the race, then your job is to get out there and talk to people and let them know what you think. And that's what I've been doing. I put on 10,000 miles on my car, driving around this district. That gets me actually 2 round trips to Los Angeles and back in the last 6 months because I have prioritized getting to know people. I have made sure that they know who I am and what I believe and what my values are. And that's what I'll continue to do. But I will also, this is another nice thing, I will have more time because my associate dean position will be done and I will be spending all my time in the summer because I won't be on the clock at my first job. I will be able to raise money like I need to be able to do to stand toe-to-toe with David McKinley because it will take hard work and it will take some money. But it won't take as much, I think, as people think it will. And so we have a chance. And if you all stay as motivated and engaged as you are, that's how we're gonna win this thing. Because I think we can. I'm optimistic. I wouldn't have gotten into this race if I didn't think I could win.
Okay, we will conclude the event with the candidates with a closing statement.
So I guess I started it there by saying that wouldn't have gotten into this race if I didn't think I could win. I am very serious about my desire to go to Congress to represent people who are not being represented right now, people who are working full-time, who are raising kids, who are parents of kids in public schools. I want us to be finally represented by the people who understand what it's like to live the lives we live. And that's why I've been working so hard at this and asking for forgiveness from my family, who I really miss, who are here tonight. This is what they do to see me. They have to come to things like this and run the audio. But I really do. I am serious about this. I think I really do have a chance of beating David McKinley, because I think we need a real contrast to him, and I think I am that contrast. So I thank you for coming tonight and hearing what we have to say, and for the really good questions. And I hope that you'll continue to stay engaged and motivated to get us some change in November. Thank you.
I decided I would run for this because of the lack of particularly in the 2nd District, which I ran for in 2016, and did reasonably well with no money and no name recognition. And I learned that I could really help my fellow West Virginians overcome the position we've gotten in over these past years. And the way I can do that is best is because of the relationships that I've already built in the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives, where I can hit the ground running and get immediate attention from very high-level people in those offices. And we can also learn to compromise. And how many people have heard the lack of compromise being a real issue? Well, I think it's my business experience of doing that. That's what I did. I went around the world for General Electric, doing billion-dollar businesses, transactions, and we had to compromise. We could not dictate if we wanted to stay in business, everything, so we did compromise. I can lead that, or at least identify the people that can help me do it, and I can help them. And in that regard, I respectfully request your vote on May the 8th in the Democratic primary. And if elected your representative, I promise you on my West Point honor to devote the remainder of my working life for the betterment of our state, each of you, your children, and your grandchildren. I sincerely appreciate your having me here tonight to participate in this event, and I look forward to representing you in the United States Congress as together we move West Virginia forward and provide a better place to raise children, to work at a secure, well-paying job, and to live in a wonderful community in the coming years. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. So in closing, I'd like to thank the candidates for taking the time. I'd like to thank the audience for being here. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for helping us coordinate these forums. They also have information on voting and elections. We're in the middle right now. Early voting's already started. So if you're looking for information on that,